What's up, my dudes? Yo, dudes, Reflex has the best whips of all time. Don't even at me, bro. Just think about this. Just want you guys to think about. If it wasn't for Reflex, there literally wouldn't even have ever been a hashtag free the whips, the whole 9 yards of all that. There literally wouldn't have been any of that. None of it, dude. Absolutely none of it. Like, just think about that, though. Is that not insane? Like, Reflex has literally became the standard, the pillar, the what whips in an arcade motocross game are supposed to be. Like, it's became the entire expectation and standard when it comes to that. Like, kind of insane when you think about it. And by the way, whenever I say Reflex has the best whips, obviously I'm talking about arcade motocross games. I'm not talking about MX Simulator. Obviously, MX Simulator's on a whole nother level, especially when you start talking about, that kind of game. It's completely different. I'm just talking about arcade motocross games, right? Reflex just, and especially on the Xbox 360 version of Reflex, it's so magical that it's unexplainable. You know what I'm saying? That's literally what it is on the 360 version of Reflex. Like, just that, you feel like you're 100% one with the bike, connected with the bike through the controller, and when you, like, snap turn over a jump face, you like snap and do a scrub, the way the bike will snap on the lip of a jump face compared to just doing like a really big whip like you can do on Reflex as well. Like that right there, you see what I'm saying? That sort of snap effect you can get where you can really like actually scrub the bike. You know how most motocross and supercross games and stuff, when you're doing a whip or a scrub, it's pretty much the same thing. Like, there's not really differences in it. You know what I mean? Those Monster Indy Supercross games and Milestone games, there's really no difference in doing like a scrub versus a whip. There's really not any of that, right? Whereas this game, look at how much different that was from that sort of snap scrub effect I had, that staying really close to the ground effect that I had. And it's actually, there's actually a skill to it too on Reflex. That's the crazy part. Like, for instance, your first day on Reflex, you're not even going to be able to do those sort of snap scrubs like I'm talking about, right? You can get all the way. See, there is none of that, like, if you whip too far over or you whip too much under the bike, it just completely instantly kicks you off the bike. You know how it does in the Milestone games, and where it's like, if you just barely get too far up under the bike or you whip over too much or whatever, it's like somebody shot you out of the stands. You know what I'm saying? Like somebody sniped you out of the stands. You just pop right off the bike. Even though you didn't hit anything, there was none of that. You just popped off because technically the rider was not lined up on the bike anymore. You know what I mean? And that there's none of that. Absolutely none of that on Reflex. That's one big aspect that makes it so amazing on Reflex, is just that simple fact alone. You know what I mean? You can get it all the way turned around backwards like that. You can do your standard, you saw me do that like pop, snap to the ground style scrub. You can do more of like a natural where you just kind of get it over like that right there. You know what I mean? More like your standard whip, right? There's just so many, depending on what kind of jump you're on, there's just 1.5 trillion different variations. See, there's that kind of style whip, almost like a that was kind of like a turn up, but I didn't really turn it up. You know what I mean? I just kind of turned it around backwards. There's just so many. You can see that right there. See how I kind of like scrub rolled off of that jump even though it wasn't really a jump? See, that's the kind of shit you can't even do in other motocross games at all. That kind of like what James Stewart would do in real life type shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't even do that. You saw how it was literally, I did like a scrub off of the face of that right there. And that's like not even a face. It's literally just like a little downhill. You couldn't do a whip like that for nothing on those other motocross games. There is no way. There's no way. That's one of the biggest things that makes Reflex's whip system the best, is the fact that there's so many different variations to it. And literally every single time you come off a jump face, it feels like you're doing something slightly different. It's the furthest thing from a feeling like you're hitting a button and playing an animation. That's what makes Reflex's whip system so badass. That's what does it right there. I mean, straight up, like there's not even a question about it. That's what does it, right? Whereas the other motocross games are just, it's like you're playing an animation, hitting a button, playing an animation. Then you get on the free ride tracks and literally get it all the way backwards, bro. Like, and if you get it too far around, then you just do a 360. You know what I mean? It doesn't like pop you off the bike or do any weird janky bullshit where it kills the immersion and all that. You stay on the bike. You know what I mean? That's such an awesome aspect to Reflex's whip system. But really, it just comes down to there's so many different types of whips that you can do. I mean, you can like, you know, kind of like scrub off like that. There's just so much variables to the movement with the physics system, the in-air physics system of Reflex to begin with, but also the dual stick controls of Reflex and how that's really truly integrated into the game. It really gives it that difference of feeling. You know what I'm saying? It really gives it that multi-layered feeling to it, right? But there's just so many different kinds of whips you can do. Scrub, I mean, when you really start getting deep in the game and you start putting in a bunch of hours, and for whatever reason, and when I'm saying all this, I'm playing this on Xbox 360. I'm specifically talking about the 360 version of Reflex. I don't know what it is about the PC version of Reflex, but it doesn't have the same sort of, like, controller input feeling to it. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have the same, you know what I'm talking about? You feel 100% connected to the bike through the controller, like exactly what you're doing on the thumbsticks is what's happening on the screen. That's what the 360 version of Reflex feels like, right? But when you get on the PC version of Reflex, it's got this weird, almost like millisecond delay. And it's one of those things, if you've never even played Reflex on the Xbox 360, you really shouldn't even be given an opinion on a whip system of a motocross game because you don't even really understand. I mean, and that's the honest to goodness truth. Like, you really don't even actually understand what's going on because it's so much on another level, on another legendary level. Like, look at how completely different those two whips were. It all depends on, like, how quick you turn off the jump face before you come off the jump face, you know what I'm saying? That makes all the difference in the world, and what kind of jump face you're coming off of, and all of that. Like, it just, every little movement, little minute movement you make depending on where you're at on the jump, either the base of the face or the middle of the jump face or the lip or whatever, and then how you lean in the air changes everything to it. There's literally 1.5 million different variations of whips you can do, which then creates where you can kind of have your own style in the game, your own whip style in the game. Everybody can kind of have different ways that they whip in Reflex, and whereas a lot of those other motocross games, everybody's just whipping the same because there's not any variation in it. And that's really just the way it is. And it's funny how a lot of those, Milestone fanboys, some of those guys, whenever I'll go in there and talk about some of these newer motocross games, like hashtag free the fucking whips and all this kind of stuff, like, we need better whips, it needs whips. All those dudes go in there and say things like, the whips aren't that important to a motocross game. It's just whips in a motocross game. What's the big deal, man? It's just whips. Well, if you actually played the 360 version of Reflex and felt the whip system of this game, you would understand why it's so important. That's the thing. You're obviously not even getting what's actually going on, because if you had played these games, you would understand that, right? You wouldn't even be saying that because you'd realize the extra fun factor it adds, the extra skill gap it adds, just the extra something to do in the game that it adds, and the realism of real life motocross. And it's funny how people get this whole weird ass idea, like just because it's like an official Supercross game or it's, trying to be like an official racing game, it doesn't really need like big whips in it, or what's the point in that? They don't really do that in racing and all that. Dude, you're trying to defend something for no reason. Why wouldn't you want a good whip system in a motocross game? That's what you should be saying. Why isn't there a good whip system where you can whip really big in a motocross game and have a skill to the whip system and a true scrub skill? See, there's still a complete whip and scrub skill in real life, even in racing. Not as much as like it would be when you see the dudes riding on, like, free riding, doing thick thug, nasty, fatty, gnarly ass whips and shit. It's not really always like that in the racing, but like it adds so much to racing in a racing game, and even just in a motocross game in general when you're free riding and being able to throw really cool whips and do different stuff like that. I just can't explain the difference that that makes and the fun factor and the replayability and the variability and the not getting bored, like whereas a lot of the other motocross games, you just feel like you're just jumping. There's really, like, you don't even want to whip. It's just such a completely different aspect, you know? Versus having like a game that has a really good whip system to it. It's just totally different in what it does for the game, how it makes the entire game feel just in general, and like, you know, just being able to scrub and the whole nine. Let me try to get on the damn track. Let me get it in this side view. We'll see what we can do with this. I'm going to show it off a little better. But it's just one of those things, man. Like, you just don't know until you've really sat down and played Reflex for a while on the 360 specifically. Like, if you just hopped in there on the PC version of Reflex and you're like, oh, what is everybody ranting and raving about on this whole whip system? It's really not all that great. Well, let me tell you, the 360 version of Reflex, to me personally, literally feels twice as good. Twice, times two times, you know what I'm saying, as good as the PC version whips. And that's one of the biggest things I've noticed, like PC version of Reflex versus the console version of Reflex. That's one of the biggest differences I've noticed is the way the whips feel. Like, I mean, you can just see it in the gameplay of people that, you know, people that go in there and play and upload footage of the PC version of Reflex. They ain't whipping nowhere near as gnarly, nowhere near as crazy as dudes are whipping in the 360 version of Reflex. Like, they're just not. I'm telling you right now, they're not. It doesn't have the same sort of rotation. It's got like a delayed, lesser rotation. You don't really see a lot of that like true snap scrub, whip it all the way further than backwards on the PC version of Reflex. You just don't see it. It just doesn't have the same look to it. And it doesn't have the same feel to it either. You know what I mean? And that's a really big thing. Like, it's definitely something to think about. Look at that, bro. Look at that scrub. That is literally the definition of perfection of a scrub in an arcade motocross game. It can't get any better than that right there in an arcade motocross game. Literally. Cannot get any better. There's the whole skill of it too, right? It's like you've got to know the precise moment, the precise amount of steering, or you're going to wreck. You know, it's got the whole system of if you scrub too hard, then it's just gonna fling you like a crazy direction and pop you off the bike. But if you scrub too early, then it's not even going to scrub that big. You know, there's like all these little balancing aspects to it. There's so many different elements to it. It's like, it's literally 1,000 times the whip system of any of those other arcade motocross games. Seriously, though. Like, I'm not even over-exaggerating in the slightest when I say that, dudeskies. Like, not even in the slightest. It is just so much fun when you've got a scrub system like that that's completely different than the whip system, and it actually makes you faster because it's keeping you on the ground. There's actually like a gameplay, there's a reason to do it more than it just looks cool. You know what I mean? Like, there's a whole fucking reason to do it in the whole nine, man. Like, god dang. But like that right there, you know, just being able to, I don't know, there's a magic to the whip, there's a magic to the physics, there's a magic to the movement on the 360 version of Reflex it's just unexplainable, dude, really. And if I was to sit here and like try to compare the whips of all of the arcade motocross games together and kind of just try to think about how they all are, I mean, obviously Reflex is by far on the very tippity top of the slope, but if I was to put, like, what's the next best whip system in a motocross game, I would say Alive, because Alive kind of still has a little bit of that reflexy whip system. Obviously not all of it, but it's the one that kept it. Alive is the most like Reflex when it comes to the whip systems of all of the other motocross games, hands down. It's the most like it. And then you would go down from there to like MX versus ATV All Out, right? I would say is like third place in the whip system category of arcade motocross games. And all those milestone games are completely under all of that. Totally under all that. I would even put like friggin' Unleashed above like MXGP Pro's whip system. I mean, seriously, boys. I know that's going to sound insane to some of you guys, but I'm being dead serious when I say that. Like, it's just the truth. It's just you got to understand what makes a whip system so good in a motocross game, and all the variation to it, and being able to do different kind of whips and not feel like you're hitting a button to play an animation, and the dual stick control system of Reflex, being able to turn both your thumbsticks the same way, and the whole there's a whole like TLC like roll. There's a whole finesse that Reflex's whip system has to it. That's what's totally missing out of the Milestone games. There's no finesse in the whip system of the Milestone games. There's just none of that. There's no finesse to it. You got to understand what I'm saying. It's like, it can still look halfway decent in like, whatever MXGP Pro, when you throw a whip out to the side, it can look halfway decent, but that doesn't mean that there was any finesse to actually doing it whatsoever. And the thing about it is you're seeing the same whip system over and over and over and over in the Milestone games because there's no variation to them. You can't do like differences of whips. And the whole thing with All Out, it is super free whips, and you can do all different kinds of whips, full-blown turn-up whips, whip it all the way around backwards, do a lot of different kinds of whips. But with All Out specifically, I feel like it's more of it's like it just needs tuning. It needs to be just a couple little things reworked on the air physics of All Out to get that whip system down. But at least it's free. At least you can do a whip. Whereas in the Milestone games, hell, all the way up to like, what the hell, like maybe Supercross, the first game, you literally couldn't even really do a whip in those games, like at all. You couldn't even do it no matter how hard you turned thumbsticks. Kind of like how it was in MX vs. ATV Supercross. Like, you just can't even really do a whip. It's like restricted. They went down that whole road in a lot of those motocross games where the whips just felt restricted. Like you just couldn't even do it regardless of how much you turn the thumbsticks. Then it finally got to All Out where they really freed up the whips, but it's just because they're free doesn't mean they're perfect. You know what I'm saying? Like, you just got to know. You just got to know what I'm talking about when I talk about whips and stuff in these games. Like, it's something that you get a really deep respect and love for whenever you've played a game like Reflex on the 360 every single night for 5 years straight. You start to get a different level of like understanding of what is a good whip system in a motocross game. What is a fun whip system? What is a skill-gapped whip system? What is a good scrub and whip system in a singular motocross game? What is a good finesse to the whip systems in a motocross game? See, all those things, there's no way you could possibly even remotely begin to understand that. You can't even understand it if you don't have quite a few hours into the 360 version of Reflex. You wouldn't even understand it. If you've only played the PC version of Reflex, you wouldn't even understand that. You wouldn't even understand what the hell I'm talking about at all. And if you've only played the Milestone games or that kind of vibe, you wouldn't understand what I'm talking about at all. Not even in the remote slightest. You couldn't even understand. I could sit here and explain it to you, and you wouldn't even understand it. It's got this whole slow whip vibe thing too, right? You can do these cool ass, like, super slow jump up a hardcore jump face and like throw these whips and toss the side of the bike up. You know how you see some of those dudes doing those, like some of those pro dudes doing those photo shoots and stuff where they hit like wall jumps really slow and then just kind of toss the bike, pancake the bike out to the side of them. So you can do all that kind of stuff in Reflex. Like, it's so sick, dude. Like, goddamn. And the speed that you have going up to the jump face changes everything. That's what really allows you to be able to do a scrub versus a whip. Like, you can't really do those snap to the ground scrubs if you're going too slow, right? So it has that whole real life aspect to it as well, where you actually have to have speed to scrub in this game like you do in real life. You know what I mean? But you can whip going about half the speed. You don't need a ton of speed to throw a whip in the game, but you do need a ton of speed to do an actual real snap scrub. You know what I mean? Oh, look at that. Turn up whips, dog. See that right there? See, you can do it. Like, but I'm just saying, don't even give an opinion if you haven't sat there and played the 360 version of Reflex for literally at least 1,000 hours, at least 1,000 into the 360 version of Reflex. Don't even give an opinion on it because you don't understand. I'm not trying to be mean by saying that. I'm not trying to say that you can't have a good opinion or can't, dude, I'm all about free speech. Say whatever the hell you want to say. I'm just saying your opinion is basically invalid if you don't at least have 1,000 hours into the 360 version of Reflex, because it's impossible for you to really understand it to the level that needs to be understood to really know what I'm even saying when I say all this. You understand? There's no way, because the skill gap of Reflex has such a more deep level to it that you have to have played it that long to really understand, so I don't know, dude. It's just on another level. It really is. It's just endless. That's the true difference of the 360 whip version of Reflex to all the other arcade motocross games. It feels endless. It feels like you could do a different whip every single time you come off that jump face, just like it is in real life. You know what I'm saying? And of course, MX Simulator is like that, but times like another 1,000 because it's actual simulator physics. But it's just like, dudes, it's just on another level. Right there, I couldn't hardly really get that snap scrub because of how smooth that jump face was. It's like, it just all depends on the exact smoothness of the jump face, the exact peak of the jump face, and it completely changes how you're going to be able to whip on the jump, like it actually is in real life, bro. See, that's what's so crazy about it. It's just got so many of these like real life elements to it, to real life whips. It's just so much ahead of its time of a whip system in a motocross game. Here we are another 10 years later, and it literally feels like the whip systems in the motocross games are like 3 steps backwards from what they were in Reflex, or 10 steps backwards if you want to go to like the milestone games. Those literally feel 10 steps backwards. Those feel, okay, let me just explain it like this. The milestone games whip system feel 10 years older than Reflex's whip system, even though Reflex came out 10 years ago, 10 years before all these milestone games that I'm talking about. But you could literally reverse what you would think, how you would think the games had came out. You understand what I'm saying? You would think the milestone games that came out 10 years ago, and then they improved the whips, and then now, 2019, these are the whips in motocross games like in Reflex. But in reality, Reflex came out in like 2008 or 9, 10 years ago. You see what I'm saying? It shouldn't be like that. Why the hell is it like that? Some of you motocross game companies need to realize what the hell's going on, because whatever the hell you're doing ain't cutting it. I'm just telling you. That's downright pitiful, the whip systems in those milestone games. It's not even a whip system. Don't even call it a whip system. It don't even deserve it. Literally. It don't even deserve it. Now, when you go back to like Unleashed and Untamed, when you go back and look at them now, yeah, they do feel outdated now, but for their time, they were pretty damn solid. You know what I mean? They literally were. But Reflex just got it all together. Everything just came together at the right time. The dual stick controls, the more realistic physics of Reflex, like everything just came around to give you that really, really awesome feeling on the bike. And that's what it all comes down to at the end of the day right there. So either way, yeah, man, these are the best whips in any arcade motocross game. There's really, I don't even say you can really question it. I just don't. It's not even a question. Like, it's not even up for debate, dude. Like, don't even try to debate it. See, and there's that whole thing where, like, sometimes when you come off a jump face on Reflex and you try to whip, it literally doesn't even move at all because you didn't whip at the right time. See, there's like a whole skill to it, dog. There's a whole, like, timing thing to it and precise leaning and movement, and there's a whole like how you steer the bike versus how you lean the bike, and what you do with each one of those that's going to completely change the way that bike reacts in the air. Totally is going to change everything about that, your trajectory, everything about it, See, I think one problem that All Out has to it is it feels like the whip system to that game, you can do too much in the air after you leave the jump face, whereas you don't want too much of that, you know what I mean? Obviously, you're not trying to make it like a simulator where every bit of it's done before you leave the jump face, but you still don't want it to be like you could just come off the jump going straight, completely perfectly straight, and then do your entire whip in the air. You don't want it like that because that's not really like, I mean, that's just kind of killing the whole point of like scrubbing on a jump face where you're whipping going up the jump face. It kills that entire timing and skill aspect to it. Man, dog. Like, and some of you guys know exactly what the hell I'm talking about. Turn up whips, baby. But some of you guys don't know what the hell I'm talking about. And that's really the issue, is the guys that don't know what I'm talking about. They don't understand it. They haven't really put 1,000 hours into the 360 version of Reflex. So they're giving these opinions and giving these thoughts and acting like the Milestone Games whips are not that bad and all this horse shit, when in reality they're just off. They're just not really talking real. They're not really speaking from real experience. They're speaking from very little experience, and Mr. Defender of the official Monster Energy Supercross game, you know, that's what they are. It's not really talking from experience and thousands upon thousands of hours into these arcade motocross games over years and years and years. It's not, you know, you got to understand who you're talking to. You got to understand who's got the time put in, who's got the expertise on it, right? That's what makes the difference, man. But either way, appreciate you guys watching all the videos. Later, dudes. Oh, whip of the century. Just kidding. If I had a little bit of a bigger jump, I could have brought it back around. But that's the perfect definition right there of how, see, that kind of whip, like 90% of people that play Reflex would never even be able to throw a whip like that because they can't even get it's really quite difficult to lean and get it to do what I just did right there. Exactly what I just did, like that full-blown turn-up whip and then where it comes all the way back around. This was back in the days when turn-up whips weren't even that big of a deal in real life. That's what's insane. You know, you could do this shit in Reflex before people were really doing it in real life. Like, holy shit. That's pretty wild, dude. I mean, there's literally 1.5 million different kinds of ways you can come off that jump face on Reflex. Literally, this is how you make a whip system to an arcade motocross game, period. There ain't nothing else to say, dude. So either way, boys, appreciate all support. If you scrub too hard, you're going to pop off like that, just like you would in real life, just like if you dragged your foot pegs, dragged your handlebars, you know what I'm saying? It's going to do just that exact thing that you think it would do in real life, right? That's what's the thing about Reflex is so cool, is it's like an arcade motocross game, but it still keeps that whole, like, what you think it would do in real life kind of thing to it, right? 10,000 times more than any of these other arcade motocross games does. You know what I mean? Like, god dang, it's just too cool, dude. But either way, don't forget, guys, you can go follow me up on all of my social media crap at Spencer Turley, no space, no capital. I'll add you boys back up. So, yeah, dudes, appreciate all the support. Keeping it rolling. Got the new mic rolling. You know what's up. So, yeah, dog. I know some people are going to get all offended. Holy shit. Oh, damn it. I almost landed. That was like literally a... What the hell? Oh, my gosh. It's endless, dude. I swear to God. I've never whipped like that in this game ever in my entire life. And I literally have like 10,000 hours into Reflex, and I've never whipped that. Look at that. Look at the different goddamn whips I'm doing. It's endless, bro. It's endless. Like, you just got to know. You just got to know, like, God, it literally feels like you could just do anything off the jump face that you could possibly imagine in the realm of somewhat realism. You know what I mean? That's what Reflex's whip system feels like. God, just too cool, dude. Too cool. But this is where it's at. This is the GOAT of arcade motocross games, the GOAT of whip systems in the arcade motocross games. And some of you dudes that are hardcore PC Reflex players, I ask you, please, for the love of God, go whip on the 360 version of Reflex, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Just do it, dog. Make sure you have your little tuning set up, the turning tuning thing down to where it's like the quickest turning that you could possibly have. Just make sure you have that on there. And make sure you're on a fully upgraded bike, and then you'll know what I'm talking about. Like, dudes, I know I keep like doing a damn 360 on accident, but you could bring that back around. You know what I'm saying? Like, for real. Man, it's just, it is the closest thing to perfection when it comes to arcade motocross game whip systems. And none of the other arcade motocross games are even close. That's what's sad about it. They're not even close. Like, in Alive is probably the closest, and it's not even close. I swear to God, if they can ever bring this sort of whip system back to another MX vs. ATV game, it'll instantaneously make the game 5 times as good. Instantly. Literally, not even considering anything else. It will instantly make that new MX vs. ATV game 5 times as good if they can just even remotely get it close back to this kind of feeling right here. So, either way, dudes, appreciate all the love. Later, my dudes.